Okay, go ahead.
Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this opportunity that we have, that we can get together, that we are, while we are so far apart. Thank you, dear Father, that you give us a roof over our heads, that you protect us, and you say that you're saving us. Help us, dear Father, right now to concentrate our minds that we may be able to understand the importance of the information that we're going to study. Help us to understand and retain this logic, this material, so that we may be able to impart this information to the people that need it in the future. Dear Heavenly Father, please drive away all the darkness, all the dark clouds in our minds, and help us to feel safe, and help us to realize that that you are our rock, that nothing can take us away from you. Dear Heavenly Father, please bless everybody who is not with us at this moment, and help us to again give us wisdom, oh Father, give us wisdom and understanding. In Jesus' name we pray and we thank you. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. One last quick thing. When it comes to exercising faith when you're in great trial and stress, it's
Mhm.
literally a defeat on Satan. Because what Satan wants is for us to give in to the doubt and despair. So if he wants us to give in to the doubt and despair, then he has an entrance in. So if you don't give in to the doubt and despair and you exercise faith instead, he doesn't have an entrance in. So you have vanquished him in that trial.
Yeah, amen. Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you to Sister Susan for her comments. That she says that I think we all feel the same way. Yeah, yeah, that's so true. Okay, this presentation, the reason why I picked this presentation, it was just, I heard about this series about the Book of Esther before, but I did not, I didn't have a clear understanding of what, I just only knew that the Queen Vashti was the church that is being passed by, but other than that, I didn't study the details of how profoundly prophetic this book is. And here I would like us to, okay, let me zoom in a little, fit width. Yeah, so, uh, so, uh, Book of Esther. So the presentation first, he starts this presentation with the quote that he studies, that he, you know, discusses in detail, and then this quote is relevant to the further material. So this quote is found in the third selected messages 338, paragraph 1. Never are we absent from the mind of God, and God is our joy and our salvation. Each of the ancient prophets spoke less for their own time than ours, so that their prophesying is in force for us. Now all these things happened unto them for ensamples, and they are written for our admonition, upon whom the ends of the world are come. Not unto themselves, but unto us they did minister the things which are now reported unto you by them that have preached the gospel. Unto you is the Holy Ghost sent down from heaven, which things the angels desire to look into. This introductory paragraph makes a clear statement that each of those ancient prophets spoke more about the times in which we live in than their own times. We want to reiterate this point that their prophesying is in force for us. Enoch, the seventh from Adam, was ever prophesying the coming of the Lord. This great event had been revealed to him in vision. Abel, so dead, is ever speaking of the blood of Christ, which alone can make our offerings and gifts perfect. We are told in these two sentences that Enoch received visions about the end of the world. And even so Abel is dead, his blood is speaking to us today. The next sentence is important for us to understand. the Bible has accumulated and bound up together its treasures for this last generation. We want to make it very clear that we are the last generation. This is not the focus of this presentation, but we have studies to show that we are in fact this last generation. All the great events and solemn transactions of Old Testament history have been and are repeating themselves in the church in these last days.
Can I say something?
Uh-huh.
You were just I was talking to Elaine the other day, and it was like we were talking, and even when I was walking the other day, we are the last generation. Are we understanding that this is it? That this is the end?
If you listened, if you heard his last presentation on the Fin website, he actually talks about it, that the I guess I can give an answer, but it's not going to make sense because it's hard to translate it, I mean, because I'm not a perfect speaker, but
Right.
the idea is that the date is fixed. So like if he was supposed to come in 1863, or some kind of date in that first time, he knew the date, and that date was fixed, and that date is immovable. However, when the conditions aren't met, then the new line, the new reform line shows up. So now he's going to have to wait for, and we're going to have to wait for the next date that is fixed by him. So the same way, like in 2020 some, 20 some, in our generation, there's a fixed date at which he's supposed to come, and if we are disobedient, and if we're lacking and don't do our job at all, it is quite possible, like theoretical, and he says it's theoretical, but then he says he doesn't believe, Elder Praminder doesn't believe that that there's going to be a next generation after ours. But then he doesn't totally reject it, because we have had Ellen White, Millerite's generation, where in 1860s Ellen White said that this is the time where he was supposed to come, period. The rest is the delay. I mean, the rest is because of us, because of we caused this delay. So basically, if we're persevering, most likely that this time he's coming in our generation.
So then we need to knowing that, and if we really want to go home because we're sick and tired of how we have to live, and we want to see him, then we should do our due diligence and strive the best we can with that mindset.
Yes,
Yeah.
and what's interesting, that if you look at this virus, what this virus causes, the people that are survivors of this, of this disease, their lung capacity is decreased. It's still not the same. Plus, there is no firm evidence, because there is no study yet, there's no data yet, that this immunity that is being developed, that it is firm and it is lasting. Because for some immunity to have, for you to be completely immune to certain disease, usually it's bacterial. It's the immunity against the bacteria that we can develop a really strong immunity that lasts for, decades. However, it's not the same with the virus, because the virus mutates. That's one. Plus, the immunity that's caused by viral infection is usually it's usually not set in stone. Like, it is not that strong.
Can I ask you, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
I was just going to ask a question. So, I know most of us, well, me, I mean, I can't remember, maybe years ago, maybe my first operation or something like that. I don't know. But I've never taken antibiotics, cause I just never did. I just never had to take antibiotics. And so if you really haven't taken antibiotics, then it's probably a little bit better, okay, because then you know how antibiotics kind of deplete the immune system or something?
They do annihilate
And yeah, and
the
most of us,
microbiome in the in the digestive tract and general microbiome. But
okay.
so yeah,
People develop tolerance to antibiotics. And if they take a lot of antibiotics, they need more and more.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
so no problem. So the Bible has accumulated and bound up together its treasures for this last generation, and we want to make it very clear that we are this last generation. And okay, all the great events and solemn transactions of Old Testament history have been and are repeating themselves in the church in these last days. This sentence teaches that the ancient histories are repeating themselves in the day in which we live in. This church, our church, believes these things. But unfortunately, when we consider how these histories are repeating, what is being taught today is that the only thing that repeats are the moral issues that are brought to view in these stories, in these stories in the Bible. But we understand, this movement understand that much more than the moral views are brought to view. The intricacies in these stories teach us specific and vital truth for us at the end of the world. This is the approach that we use when we are studying our Bibles. As we study the book of Esther, we're going to look beyond the morality in this story. We're going to focus on prophetic symbology used in here. There is Moses still speaking, teaching self-renunciation by wishing himself blotted from the book of life for his fellow men, that they might be saved. David is leading the intercession of the church for the salvation of souls to the end of the earth. The prophets are still testifying of the sufferings of Christ and the glory that should follow. There the whole accumulated truth are presented and forced to us that we may profit by their teachings. We are under the influence of the whole. There again, she brings up this concept that prophesying is still enforced to us today, for us today. We are under the influence of the whole, and that's important to note, because the Seventh-day Adventist Church has taken the view. Okay, this church has taken the viewpoint that this is only a moral issue at the end of the world. So the Seventh-day Adventists are no longer under the influence of the whole Bible, because they are not considering the prophetic part of the stories, that they are actually part of the prophecy. We read Bible stories with a single purpose of extracting a moral lesson, and that is why those passages don't make any sense to us living at the end of the world. That is why many portions of the scriptures are looked up to us. By and large, we as a church stand in opposition to these statements, because we are not under the influence of the whole of the Bible. What manner of persons ought we to be, to whom all this rich light on inheritance has been given, concentrating all the influence of the past with the new and increased light of the present? This is another key point that we want to focus on. We want to get all these past histories and concentrate them. But there is more to this. We need to add this concentration with new and increased light of the present. Accrued power is given to all who will follow the light. Their faith will increase and be brought into exercise at the present time, awakening an energy and an intensely increased earnestness, and through dependence upon God for His power to replenish the world and send the light of the Son of Righteousness to the ends of the earth. We as a congregation have a varying levels of understanding. So he's speaking to us, the auditorium. Since we can't go back to the very beginning of this message to lay foundation, I will have to assume that you already know. Another problem I came across repeatedly is that Adventists by and large are now unfamiliar with the Old Testament histories. Unless you understand the Old Testament histories, it is very hard to understand what we are teaching. The book of Esther is a complicated book to understand on many levels, on level of morality and on level of prophecy. For those of you who aren't familiar with our previous presentation, morality and prophecy, I want to explain something. I will not be addressing the issues of immorality in the book of Esther. I am fully aware of the arguments people bring forth when we present the prophetic viewpoints of this book, but I have already dealt with these issues in the previous series. I will be addressing the quote of Ellen White where it says that Vashti, the queen of Ahasuerus, is someone who is good, and she casts Ahasuerus, the king, in a bad light. I understand these issues, and on a moral level, I am not in disagreement with the spirit of prophecy. Why do we want to study the book of Esther? What possible use does the book of Ancient Queen has to us at the end of the world? We could ask that question of all Old Testament stories. Go to the book of Ruth, story of David and Goliath. In fact, the whole reign of David. There are many stories in the Old Testament that we have understood as being moral stories, which were essentially children's stories. Because we have confined these books to the moral level, we think that they have nothing to teach us at the end of the world except how to be good people. But we have stated repeatedly that everlasting gospel is not a moral test. It is a prophetic test. You might think that the book of Esther is only a short book, but we won't be able to cover the book in a weekend. Some details of the book we won't be addressing, but we will study the structure of this book and what relevance it has to us at the end of the world. Things are moving very rapidly in the world. We are in the midst of the struggle between the West and the East. Two empires are clashing. And in the midst of this struggle, we can see that in the last 12 months, that a man is rising to fame, and this man is shaping history, and he hasn't risen to power yet. All of us should know who I am speaking about. We want to address this person only briefly. I want you to understand that the times in which we live in, have all been prophesied in the scriptures. You guys realize who he's talking about, yeah?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Trump.
Yes.
Yeah.
The historical backdrop of this book. So we need to understand the times in which this book was written to make a correct application of our time. If you're familiar with our previous presentations, you know that we rely upon structures of the stories. For example, if we were to speak about the everlasting gospel, we would go to Revelation 14, and there we would see three angels brought to view. So if we studied the Revelation 14, we would see the similar language used in Revelation 18. So if you want to understand the structure in Revelation 14, you need to understand its relationship to Revelation 18. So here you can see structure of Revelation 14 combined with 18. So there's three angels and then one more angel. If you don't understand the relationship between these two chapters, you won't be able to make a correct application of the events at the end of the world. Another structure that we use in our studies is structure from Daniel 11:40-45. From it we can derive that there is time of the end, Sunday law 1, Sunday law 2, and then close of probation. Here we understand that there is a time of the end, and we can see a progression of history in 3 steps. What is being taught here is that at the time of history, which we mark as time of the end, which is 1989 for us, his term is used in verse 40, begins a period of testing. These verses bring to view the final events of Earth's history, specifically Sunday laws that are going to hit this world until we're going to hit the close of probation. Another important structure is Matthew 25. It teaches us many truths, but the three that we want to pick up is so Matthew 25 is about talking about the parable of virgins. We want to pick up is that there is a gathering, there is a midnight cry, and there is a shut door. And another structure that we often use is found in Revelation 10:4, and it is 7 thunders. And the 7 thunders give us the structure of the history between the first and the second angel's messages of Revelation 14 and 18. So here is the structure of overlaid Revelation 14 and 18 over the Daniel 11:40-45, overlaid over the Matthew 25 parable of 10 virgins. overlaid over the 7 thunders of Revelation 10:4. So another important structure that we need to consider is found in Ezra 7:9. It talks about the first day of the first month, first day of the fifth month, and then 10th day of the seventh month. So Ezra 7:9. So here we have 2 dates of first day of the first month and first day of the fifth month. You can infer from this chapter the 10th day from the 7th month. So if you are new to this message, you need to be aware that we're picking up these models, the structures from different chapters and different stories. Without understanding this, you might think that we're plucking things up from the air. But in fact, we're making detailed application from many of these structures. One of the things, actually, it's interesting that when I was like really started listening to this presentations back in 2017, one thing that really amazed me is that Elder Jeff used to say about this hidden manna, and I thought to myself, like, where does he get this names? I mean, I've never heard anything like that. Yes. And then I just when I was reading this revelation, then I came across this hidden manna, and then I just realized that it's really many people can be listen to these presentations, because these people, the presenters in this movement, are so knowledgeable, and this is really God's light, and there's so much light, and as for from the outside, when you look from in, it looks like I've never heard of any of this, but it is actually from the Bible. It's but okay, that's a diversion. So if you're new to this message, you need to be aware that we're picking up these models and these structures from different chapters and stories. So without understanding this, you might think that we're plucking things up from the air, but in fact, we're making detailed application from many of these structures. One of the things that challenges the Seventh-day Adventists here at the end of the world is the relationship between the literal things and symbolic things. I want to make it clear that when we present our studies, we follow rules of William Miller. One of the principles that we use is that we should understand things figuratively, symbolically. For example, when we see the date first day, first month in the book of Ezra, in our calendar, this would be 1st of January. First day of fifth month would be the 1st of May. 10th day of the seventh month would be 10th of July. So you can see that we're going to Old Testament stories and picking the dates. Now, don't be concerned, as we're not date setting or time setting, but we're using these dates as symbols. Once you begin to do that, then you're able to use the whole Bible as mentioned by Ellen White. So as soon as you take a name of a person or a place or a time period or date and turn that into a symbol and run that symbol line upon line through the scriptures, and you will begin to see that scriptures open up to our understanding. In Daniel 8:13, there is a discussion between Gabriel and Christ brought to view. In that verse, Christ is called Palmonai, the wonderful numberer. So in the book of Esther, a prophetic structure is embedded. That structure is based upon the symbolic understanding of time. The book of Esther is dealing with a history when God's people are in captivity. Ahasuerus is a Persian king. As Adventists, we are familiar with this phraseology because we teach Daniel 2 frequently, and in Daniel 2, 4 major empires are depicted. The second empire is the Medes and the Persians. In the book of Esther, we are in the time of period of the second empire, the Medes and the Persians. So I want to show us the relationship of this book with other events that are occurring. One of the structures that we use is 7 thunders of Revelation 10:4. So we want to see relationship of Book of Esther and the 7 thunders of the Revelation 10:4. The 7 thunders, according to Ellen White, in manuscript 59 from 1900, is the delineation of events that occur under the first and the second angel's message. So basically, it is the history of the that lies between the first and the second angel's message. So There's a quote given, but he did not mention it, so I'll read it since it is here. The books of Daniel and Revelation are one. One is a prophecy, the other is a revelation. One a book sealed, the other a book opened. John heard the mysteries which the thunders uttered, but he was commanded not to write them. The special light given to John, which was expressed in the seven thunders, was a delineation of events which would transpire under the first and second angels' messages. It was not best for the people to know these things, for their faith must necessarily be tested. In order of God, most wonderful and advanced truths would be in order of God, most wonderful and advanced truths would be proclaimed. The first and second angels' messages were to be proclaimed, but no further light was to be revealed before these messages had done their specific work. This is represented by the angel standing with one foot on the sea, proclaiming with a most solemn oath that time should be no longer. So we take this principle that seven thunders is delineation of events in a certain history. We know that this, Ellen White says that this is the history that it lies between the first and the second angel's messages, yeah? And here it is, from 1798 to 1844. So the first angel descends in 1798, the second angel descends in 1840, and the third angel descends in 1844. So, and we see the development of that history with other histories. So these dates have relationship to previous histories by prophetic time period. How is 1844 connected to the previous histories? This history, which is the Millerite history from Seven Thunders from 1798 to 1844, is called Seven Thunders in Revelation. I'm going to show you that it is connected to the histories of seven kings of Persia. The date 457 BC is connected to 1844 by 2300 day prophecy. And as Adventists, we're familiar with it. So I'm going to do, what I'm going to do next is going to be quite advanced. We're not just looking at the 2300 days, but we're trying to see the connection between these two histories. So here he gives, so this is Seven Thunders. And this is seven kings of Persia, which is Cyrus, Cambyses, Philosmerdis, Darius the Great, Xerxes, Artabanus, and Artaxerxes. So the way we're unlocking this connection is through a key. This key is Seven Thunders, which is in this history is seven kings of Persia. So we're using this symbol, which are the events between 1798 and 1844, and seeing that it was typified by the seven kings of Persia. In the book of Ezra, Chronicles, and Nehemiah, you will be aware that in this history of the seven kings of Persia, there were three kings that did a work for God. So we're going to label these kings as 1, 2, 3. So there is a labeling that I guess didn't fit in this slide. So I connected the work of this third king with the work of the third message. Artaxerxes was the work of the third message, which is 1844. You can see a beautiful structure. As Adventists, we know about 2300 day prophecy. But when we approach our studies, when we teach people about 1844 and the cleansing of the sanctuary, we generally don't go back to Ezra or Nehemiah to look for connection. And even if we do, we only look at three kings. Each of those kings have a decree or a law. This law was to restore Jerusalem and the temple. So this progressive restoration is complete by the third decree. Through 2300 day prophecy, it is connected to the arrival of the third angel's message. And the third angel's message is preceded by the message of the first two angels. So there is another time prophecy, 2520, and we will see that the seven kings of the previous history, which is the seven kings of Judah, can also become a key. So we're going to connect the seven kings of Judah with the seven kings of Persia. And we're going to see that Jehoiakim, which is marked as K, was connected with Cyrus of Persia. We're going to try to see the connection between them. And before that, I want to connect these three histories together. And the start of this seven kings of Judah and the end of the seven thunders is connected by 2520. So we have gone from the first king of Judah to the fifth king. Yeah, so first Manasseh, then this fifth king is Jehoiakim, fifth king, and fifth king is connected to Cyrus, the first king of Persia. And it's the 70-year prophecy, by 70-year prophecy. And the seventh king will give the third decree. This Artaxerxes will give the third decree, which is connected to the third angel's arrival through 2300-day prophecy. So now we see, now we have extracted, now we can see a beautiful symmetry here. Yeah. So the fifth king, Jehoiakim, is connected to the first king of Persia, by 70 prophecy, and brought to view in the same chapter that the 25. So okay, this connection, the 70-year prophecy, that is, connection between Jehoiakim and Cyrus is brought to view in the same chapter that the 25:20 is brought to view. 25:20 is found in Leviticus 26, and the 70-year captivity is found also in this chapter. So the punishment is brought to view, and the 25:20, the 7 times of Leviticus 26, is related to the 70-year prophecy, 70-year prophecy in Leviticus 26. So 25:20 is related to 70-year prophecy now. So 1798 is also connected to 538 by 1260. Yeah, so it's 1260 years of papacy. 1260 years prophecy is also connected with 70-year prophecy. So yeah, so 1260. How is it connected? All right, the names of the kings are designated as letters, but it is important that we know their names. So the names is of the kings of Judah is Manasseh, Ammon, Josiah. So Manasseh, Ammon, Josiah, Jehoahaz, Jehoiakim, Jehoiachin, and Zedekiah. And the name of this Persian kings are Cyrus, Cambyses, false Smerdis, Darius, Xerxes, Artabanus, and Artaxerxes. So yeah. So now you can see that there's connection between these kings and the 7 thunders, because the 7 thunders are connected to the kings of Persia, and the kings of Persia are connected to the kings of Judah, and they are all connected by 25:20. So there are many truths that we can connect with the relation to these events. We know that during the reign of Zedekiah, the temple was destroyed. So between these 7 kings of Judah, there is a progressive destruction of the temple. So there's a progressive destruction starting from Manasseh and ending with Zedekiah. But these 7 kings are also connected to these 7 thunders. In Millerite history, there is a symbolic construction of the temple. So this is destruction of the temple, and this is construction of the temple. So the history of the 7 kings of Judah is the story about the destruction of the temple, while the 7 thunders Millerite is a symbolic, is the destruction of the literal temple. This is a symbolic construction of a symbolic temple. 7 kings of Judah is literal destruction. 7 kings of Persia, so literal destruction, literal construction. And I have not identified the time of Christ, and there is time of Christ, which is also destruction, destruction of the kingdom, and then construction of the kingdom. So the 7 thunders is the story of construction of the temple. Oh, yeah. So here, I guess this is not mentioned yet. This is part of a next slide. So the history of Christ connected to the 2300-day prophecy, and that is the history of destruction of the temple, destruction of the temple as well. When we look at these histories prophetically at one level, it is all about construction and destruction of the temples. It is the story of relationship between Christ and his people. In the book of Esther, we are looking at the history of the 7 Persian kings. The 7 Persian kings are Cyrus Cambyses, Cyrus' son, Phosmerdis, Darius, Xerxes, Artabanus, Artaxerxes. We will study the relationship between Cyrus and Jehoiakim, and between Artaxerxes and the third angel's message, because we want to see how these seven Persian kings, their histories, and their relationship to God's people affect us at the end of the world. So this is new light, the new way of understanding history, that we would look at the secular history and the biblical history of these kings and make prophetic application of these things for us at the end of the world. So let us focus on Xerxes, the 5th king of Persia. Xerxes is a secular historical name. The Bible, in the Bible, Xerxes is Ahasuerus. He's called Ahasuerus in the Bible. He's the one mentioned in the book of Esther. Esther is going to show us deep spiritual truths for us at the end of the world. Without placing these figures on the lines, it is very hard to understand how this little dot, Xerxes, okay, there was a dot, I don't know where is it gone, but so how this Xerxes affect us at the end of the world in this history, in the history of our 7 thunders. So when we put our history, the 7 thunders of our history on a line, we can see that all previous histories are all pointing to our line. So this history, 7 kings of Judah, 7 kings of Persia, 7 thunders, are all identifying our line. Our line starts with 1989 and ends in Sunday law. So here, here is the one with the dot. So this is the symbol of this 7 of this 7 kings of Persia. This 7 is the symbol. So this 7, okay, this kings of Persia are symbol of our 7 thunders. Okay, so what I'm doing is this dot, Xerxes, his history is discussed in our history, specifically 9/11. So his history is the story about this whole period, but specifically from 9/11 to Sunday law. We will see that this period from 9/11 to Sunday law is going to be the focus of our attention. So in the history of 7 thunders, we will see that 1840 parallels with 9/11. The way we zoom in and zoom out is based on mathematical principle called fractals, and fractals are repeating patterns. I think we all know that by now. When your pattern is repeating, you know that you have a fractal. And easiest place to see an example of a fractal in the scripture is Revelation 14:7. So verses 6 to 7 is the first angel's message. And when you see the relationship between that message with the other 2 messages, you will see a repeating pattern. So this is the principle that we use to zoom in and zoom out. So like first, second, and third. And the first in itself is like in a capsule, has you can discern first, second, and third. So before we study the book of Esther, let us see the historical placement of this book in the book of Daniel. So basically the next few slides is going to show how or why we're going to study it. Why do we consider book of Esther as being a particular element of Daniel and Revelation, specifically Daniel. So Daniel 11:1 speaks about the king of Medo-Persia, Darius the Mede. Also, I, in the first year of Darius the Mede, even I stood to confirm and to strengthen him. And now I will show thee the truth. Behold, there shall stand up 3 kings in Persia, and the fourth shall be far richer than they all. And by his strength, through his riches, he shall stir up all against the realm of Grecia. Note that Darius the Mede, mentioned in Daniel 11, is not the Darius the son of Hystaspes, which is known as Darius the Great. So the Darius the Mede is the one before Cyrus. So we are. That's why this is the kingdom of Medo-Persia, and this one this is Median. So Darius the Mede, and this Darius that is discussed later is the Darius the Great, and the one that this book of Esther deals is the Xerxes, is the 5th king of Persia. So the book of Esther describes the events that happened under Xerxes, Ahasuerus, and the history of these previous kings, um, which is Cyrus, Cambyses, Philosmergus, Darius the Great, has been dealt in the book of Daniel. So it's specific zoom in into the Xerxes. That is why when studying the book of Esther, you can't escape but look at the book of Daniel. And Ellen White says that Daniel and Revelation are one book. One is the prophecy, another is Revelation. So if we're discussing the book of Esther, it is referring us back to the book of Daniel. It means that we are investigating the book of Revelation. So you can see that study the book of Esther is a prophetic study. Considering this, I want you to know that we're using sound hermeneutical principles when studying the book of Esther. The story of these kings is brought to view in our prophecy in the book of Daniel. And this prophecy is Daniel 11, is a repeated in Daniel 11. This prophecy in Daniel 11 is a repeated enlargement of the prophecy in Daniel 8, 7, and 2. The story of Darius the Mede was also brought to view in Daniel 4, 5, and 6. Daniel 4 talks about the fall of Nebuchadnezzar, and fall is referred in Daniel 5. In Daniel 5, last verse mentions Darius the Mede, and Daniel 6 talks about the beginning of the reign of Darius. And Daniel 8 mentions the Darius the Mede again. So you can see that the history of these kings is brought to view in the book of Daniel. Why would you think that the book of Esther, which is dealing with the same time period, should not be looked at from the prophetic viewpoint? If we were doing a study on Daniel 2, we would have no problem distinguishing between the morality and prophecy. So when we talk, yeah?
Can I ask a question?
Mm-hmm.
Because up there you said we are using sound hermeneutical principles.
Yeah, uh-huh.
But didn't we learn a long time ago that so what's the difference? Because there was like hermeneutical.
Yeah.
Wasn't there a thing that we weren't supposed to go by that kind of study with hermeneutics? Or does anyone understand what I'm saying? A couple years back, remember we were saying that it's not hermeneutical, but it was still it's a study, but the way they study is with I can't explain it.
Yeah.
Hermeneutics is
Yep.
hermeneutics is just the way you study the Bible. So it's neither good nor bad. It's just the way you do it. Now there's a right way and there's a wrong way. We're doing it the right way. We're still doing the way you still considered hermeneutics, but the right way.
Hermeneutics, right. So then it was the SDA church that was teaching it the wrong way, because I remember in our studies years ago, we were talking about not teaching with hermeneutics, but with the 14 rules of interpretation.
Meaning, let me just make a note. So the hermeneutics, I just Googled it, okay, and it says that the branch of knowledge that deals with interpretation, especially the Bible or literary text. So it's literally just interpretation. It can be by you can use different methods within the hermeneutics, like different. It's like like brother Fell said, it can be neither. It can be bad, it can be good. It depends on what kind of You know what I mean? It's
Okay.
basically just general term for saying that just a you know, how do you interpret the, you know, certain text.
So then that's why Elder Parmenter put sound hermeneutic.
Yes.
Okay.
So yeah, so you can see, okay, where was I? Why do you think, okay, if we were going to study, to do a study, if we're doing study on Daniel 2, which just talks about what? Daniel 2 talks about a mountain and a statue, yeah? So if we were going to do a study, it's a famous, you know, statue with the, you know, Babylon being the gold, and then the rock and the that's carved out of the mountain and the rock, and then the rock destroys the statue. So if we were doing study on Daniel 2, we would have no problem distinguishing between the morality and prophecy. So when we talk about the Medes and the Persians, 7 kings, yeah, the 7 Persian kings in the book of Daniel, there is no moral story in there. But Esther is tucked into Daniel 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and specifically in Daniel 11. We have arrived at the book of Esther because of our understanding of Daniel, but we're going to understand the book of Esther by using this. So that's why we're going by using these structural patterns, fractals. So in summary, we have started in the Millerites history, yeah, 7 thunders, and then we connected it to, so we understood that what is 7 thunders, that 7 thunders, the way the reason how, so, okay, so how did we come to this understanding? What made us think that the 7 thunders is specifically this history? Can anybody help me? Okay, Chuck.
I think Sister White. I can't remember the book, but Sister White is the one that said so.
Yes, correct.
Delineates the
So it is a
history.
delineation of the history under the first and the second angel's message. So it's basically she's saying this is this period between this 1798 time of the end and 1844 is the 7 thunders, and that, so what was hidden from the from the people that Daniel, you know, that not Daniel, that was hidden by John, you know, was told for John to hide it, is this history of disappointment. Because if we would know, just like Elder Paminder, you know, in Germany in 2019, you know, the before the falling of the FFA, just like you know, he said that if we would have a perfect message, we would never gain a momentum, a movement, you know, a movement that even so it believes in the has wrong understanding, but it wouldn't gain a momentum. So that's why this 7 thunders, they were hidden from they were not written down. So okay, so that's, so we understood first, we understood the 7 thunders, yeah, we understood that it's on the first and the second angel's messages. We understood that this is the story, and then we understand its relationship to the stars, because it's, you know, the reason it's connected in Daniel, it's connected to the 7th king of Persia by 2300 day prophecy, yeah, and which is a famous prophecy. I mean, we even being Adventist, I think we all kind of knew about this one. And now, and we know that the first king Cyrus is connected to the kings of Judah by the 70-year prophecy in Leviticus, and we also know that the kings of Judah, the 7 kings of Judah, the first year of the king of Judah is connected to the last year of the 7 thunders, 1844, by 2520. Yeah, so all 4 lines are connected to each other by 3 kings. One, Jehoiakim, Jehoiachin, and Zedekiah. Yeah, in the kings of Judah, Cyrus, Darius, Artaxerxes, Cyrus, Xerxes, Artaxerxes. Yeah, Darius too, but 3 kings, 3 messages. So it has 3 messages. Yeah, all three of these Persian kings, they make decrees. And three messages of the Millerites history, three angels message, yeah, first, second, and third. So now we have established that Book of Esther is a prophetic book and should be studied as such. So, okay, do you guys have any questions? Because I have half of the previous next presentation, if you are willing to, or we can discuss and go over this presentation. So what do you say?
I would like to continue.
Okay, let me open up this one. I guess I need to stop share, yeah? Stop share, then I will reopen Esther 2. Okay, this one is not edited. So it has, you know, it has all kinds of funny fonts and all. It's not neat. Let me stretch it, make it one page view. Page width, okay. All right, Book of Esther, part 2. So here we just like a cheat sheet about the 7 kings of Judah and 7 kings of Persia. So Xerxes, according to secular historians, reigned a long time. Xerxes, according to secular historians, he reigned a long time, approximately 21 years. But in the Book of Esther, his reign is discussed in 3 discrete periods. So there is the 3rd year, 6th and 7th year, 11th and 12th year. This is because the story is a parable. As we know, parables can be true events and made up stories. And in this case, the true story is a parable, and as such has an end-time application. And the Lord gives us a stories of specific periods that we need. So it's just like in Matthew 13, depending on the lesson that God is trying to teach, he's going to bring to view one aspect or the other aspect. So here he's cherry-picked and provided for us these 3 periods of Xerxes' reign. So we will be looking at these symbols as figures. Esther chapter 1 and 2 are dealing with different people. Chapter 1 is dealing with Vashti, Queen Vashti. Chapter 2 is dealing with Esther. So these chapters are dealing with 2 different women, their experiences with the king Ahasuerus. Now we have 3 people in the picture, and we need to understand the relationship between them. There are also 2 other people that we need to know, which is the Mordecai and Aman. So there's now we have 5 characters. So who do they represent? So the king marries Vashti, divorces her, marries Esther. Morally speaking, everything is going wrong. Yes, so we will not address the morality of these relationships, and I totally agree. This book cannot be passed as a moral book in any kind of way. So the name Ahasuerus has various meanings, and one of them is Lion King. It can also mean prince, head, or chief. In Strong's, as well as Brown Driver Briggs, it can also mean I will be silent and poor. He represents a Lion King and also someone who is silent and poor. Does it ring the bell? Yeah. So we will discuss this later. If we take the symbology of a Lion King, we can see that this man represents Christ. So Ahasuerus represents Christ because when at the first advent he will be a silent and poor, and but the second time he shows up as a Lion King. Well, he is the Lion King. So if we take the symbology of a Lion King, we can see that Ahasuerus is Christ, and he's marrying a woman and then divorcing her, then marries another woman. So if you take symbology of Christ marrying people, that is clearly brought to view in the New Testament, then Christ marries the church. So the overarching theme of the Book of Esther is the story about Christ, Ahasuerus, divorcing the church and marrying the church. Keep in mind that this is the story about the end of the world. So if you start realizing the implications of what it means, you may become alarmed. The theme is that the church that exists at the end of the world is divorced by the Lord. So he will divorce this church that is represented by Vashti, and he will replace her with another church, which is Esther. And also Esther, if you know that the meaning of the name is star. Yeah, from Daniel 11 comes, Daniel 12 comes to mind, that the wise will be shining as stars in the sky. Yeah, so another church, Esther. This theme is also brought to view in many other books of the Bible. Book of Esther is not the only one that tells the story. So, like Daniel, Revelation, Daniel, for Gospels, etc. So it is also brought to view in Matthew 25, after describing the prophetic events in the history of the church in Matthew 24, the chapter 24. Christ starts chapter 25 by saying, then. So the point he's trying to make is that after these events that are described in Matthew 24, then the kingdom of heaven will look like the following, which is the 10 virgins, the parable of the 10 virgins. So the thing that is so striking about that chapter is that in the parable of the 10 virgins is the perspective of there being two groups. Yeah. So Matthew 25 deals about God's kingdom, about his church, that there's two groups in this church. So these two groups are brought to view over and over again in the scriptures. So when we speak about one church being bypassed and another church being married to Christ, this is not two separate churches. This is singular church. The structure and components of this church has been identified by the two groups in the book of Esther. Vashti represents the church that is being separated from God, and he is going to marry another group from the same church represented by Esther. So when Christ came to earth, he divorced the Jewish nation and married. That's exactly what happened then. He divorced the Jewish nation and married the Christian church. But the Jewish nation and the Christian church were not two separate groups of people. They were from the same group. So the disciples who were seed of the first apostolic church were the remnant of the ancient Israel, the first church. So practically all this, Galatians, Corinthians, all this epistles written to the churches that are actually mostly made by the Jewish, those were Jewish synagogues, where the Jewish people, Jewish people in those different parts of that world that believed and accepted this message. So I want you to have a clarity that the Lord is in the process. In the book of Esther, he's in the process of divorcing or separating from the Seventh-day Adventist structure. But within this structure, he will enter into a relationship, which is or covenant or marriage, with a group not from another church, but from within this church. That is the theme of the book of Esther. So chapter 1 and 2 are giving us the sequence or the prophetic clues of when it's going to happen. So you can't just go to the book of Esther at the beginning of a series or the prophetic studies without studying the background of the events, as we need to understand the symbology that is brought to view. So the following sequence of events that we need to keep in mind. So Vashti, chapter 1 deals with Vashti, which is the structure of the SDA. Chapter 2 is the Esther, remnant of the SDA, and their relationship with the seven thunders, which is the sequence of our events here. So the third angel's message that is running all throughout this history is going to be empowered. And the angel of Revelation 18 is going to come down at 9/11, and the test begins. The test of the first, second, and the third angel's messages. So by the Sunday law, this third angel that has been running since 1844 will complete his work for the church, and then the work will continue for the world. Esther teaches and confirms that this structure is correct. Ahasuerus, that is represented by Christ, is going to divorce the Queen Vashti, which is the SDA structure. And at 9/11 is going to be introduced there's going to be introduced a test. Upon this test, he will divorce Vashti and marry Esther, the remnant of the Adventism. This climactic event, this separation process between Vashti and Ahasuerus, is going to be so severe, so shocking, that if you're standing and looking in from the outside, it would appear that the church falls, because this separation is so severe that when it occurs, it will look like there is no SDA church left anymore. But the church does not fall. And this explanation of this famous, Ellen White quote is brought to view in this book of Esther. So this separation of the SDA church is so severe that the king looks as though he is left without a bride. And in this story, he is. He hasn't got a bride for several years. So here, there's periods. This is the periods in years. Years of Xerxes' reign described in the Book of Esther, which is the third year of his reign, where he divorces. During which he divorces Vashti, marries in the years 6 to 7. Yeah, and then so divorce from Vashti portrayed. Yeah. So for a portion of time in the literal story, the king is without a wife. We need to understand things symbolically, not literally. These things are happening concurrently and not sequentially, as we will see from chapter 1 and 2. So this concept of repeated enlargement or of paralleling events is one of the themes that we need to be familiar with. We have been incorrectly taught to read how to read the Book of Esther, that to read it as one event occurring after another. We do that with all of our other reading, and that is an incorrect way to study and understand the prophecy. In fact, periods 3, 6, 6 to 7, and 11 to 12, so all these 3 periods, that is this whole story that is described in the Book of Esther, are running concurrently. Even so, we have 3 discrete periods prophetically, we have only one history. So yeah, history is running concurrently. So when we get these periods and bring it over to our history, our 7 thunders, the period between 9/11 and Sunday Law is the history of the 3rd year, 7th year, and the 12th year. All of the stories need to be applied this way. At the same time, the structure is being divorced. So at the same time, when the structure is being divorced from the Lord is marrying and entering into covenant with a remnant that is taken from the same church. So this is the theme of the Book of Esther. So we, the church and Christ, have already begun the process of separation, and the process of coming together has already begun. So this structure, Seventh-day Adventist Church, is already being divorced by Christ, but it is not complete. The progressive work has already begun from 9/11 onward. So ask yourselves, as friends, family, where do you stand? Who are you represented by in this story? If you are new to this message, you would have been taught by the church that the Church of Adventism is going to go right through the struggle of this Sunday law unscathed, unharmed. But prophecy teaches otherwise. It teaches through the story of the 7 kings of Judah and with the 7 thunders of the Millerite story that the structure is going to be destroyed. So how? First, the children are going to be destroyed. Then at the reign of the last king Zedekiah, the temple, the walls, the whole city of Jerusalem, the whole structure is destroyed. It is a progressive destruction that starts with Manasseh. In that story, the destruction of Jerusalem, there is a story of Daniel who is progressively, so while there is a destruction of the temple, destruction of the nation, At the same time, there is a story of Daniel, and we know that Daniel is a wise, is depicted as wise. Yeah, so he also is represented as a wise virgin. Yeah, so the wise virgin is already there. So they are all happening concurrently. So in that story, there is a story of Daniel who is progressively lifted up before Babylon, and Daniel, becomes an example of this group of people, the remnant. So there's a relationship between Esther and Daniel. Okay, and this destruction begins in captivity. I guess that's all I have. I have a half sentence. So all right. So let us. I guess I'll ask you a question to try to see if you guys remember. There's a little particular piece of information. Maybe it's not relevant, for our understanding of this book. But anyway, Darius the Mede. Is he um the third? Is it the fourth? Is he the fourth king of Medo Persia?
Darius the Mede? No.
Okay.
They're two different Dariuses.
Yes, that's correct. Yes, Darius the Mede, he goes before Cyrus. So Cyrus is the first king of Medo Persia, and Darius the Great is a different one. Okay, so you guys are doing very well.
Months.
So okay, what's
When I
that?
first started, I like, are these the two same people? I couldn't figure it out. It just took me months to figure it out before I got confirmation.
Oh, okay. So seven thunders. So what is the seven thunders according to who?
Delineation of events.
Uh-huh.
According
Maybe a
to
little more.
First and second angels.
Yes. Great, Brother Robert. All right. So yeah, you're doing very well. So okay. So how are the seven kings of Judah, through which prophecy seven kings of Judah are related to the seven thunders, which is the Millerites' history?
what's the question?
Yeah.
Through which prophecies, what is the number that ties up the seven kings of Judah to the seven thunders, which is the Millerites' history, 1844?
That's the 2520.
Yes, great, correct. Okay. What else? So, all right. So, do you guys have any questions?
No, it's a good study.
Yeah, I asked this question and this answer is staring me in the face. That's funny. I mean, yeah.
So are you going to continue on with the rest of the studies?
Yes, if there's time. I mean, if there's a it's yeah. I mean, I wish to, because I have made a whole bunch of notes from this seminar, and they are super profound. This is just only beginning, really.
Right. So it looks like there was 7 presentations.
Yes, and it's so profound, especially when he studies the decrees of that these 7 Persian kings, these decrees that are made, and then I used the Book of Esther was one of those kind of books, one of those kind of stories that I really did not like to read and really did not care to ever to touch, because it's so immoral, and I never understood how would people find a way to preach and push it as some kind of a moral story. Like one of the pastors back home used to say that, oh, that this Queen Vashti, she did not show her her loyalty to her king, to her husband, and that is why she reaped what she sowed, something like that. And to me it sounded so bad, because from the just a simple superficial reading, it looked very unfair. Because she was, and especially if you open Ellen White, she says that Queen Vashti, the reason why she didn't show up is because, okay, this king is making a feast for men, okay, and then Queen Vashti, she was upset that, what's going to happen with women. So what she's going to do, she's going to make another feast that is going concurrently for women. And
Right.
for
So,
that, she gets treated, basically, she gets discarded, which is, if you're trying to say that this is a moral story, to me, it's a deeply immoral story.
so
However,
that pastor who was talking about this situation with Queen Vashti, he must have been a conservative.
oh yes, Commonwealth is very much conservative, but
I
it's
know, but when you guys look at the application though, um, the king here represents God and
yes,
Vashti represents the SDA,
I
which was
know,
called and didn't answer, isn't it?
I know. Yeah, this is really amazing that
Yeah, she was not immoral. This is not about morality, because if you look at the
exactly.
morality, you don't want to read the story anymore, but it's
Yes,
the
amen,
prophetic.
amen. Yeah. That's exactly how I felt. I felt
Yeah,
like I don't
sometimes we
ever
have
want
to
to.
cherry pick.
Yeah, but once you understand, once he and here Elder Parminder shows that it is actually, if you put on the prophetic eyeglasses, then you realize that this very, uh, these stories are not. You don't have to get upset and be sad that God is unfair, because this is not what God is like. This is simply a prophecy about how things are going to develop
Yeah, and
and how
also,
it is
yeah,
developing right now.
also the fact that Esther was chosen is to show us that it's not because she did anything extremely good, or she was more qualified than the other
Mhm.
one.
Yeah.
It's just because being humbled and answer the call.
Yeah. Amen.
This was a big test for when I first came into this message. And Jeff began the School of the Prophets classes in 2015. They were doing the study on Esther here, and it caused a big, even like argument within that class setting between the students not being able to differentiate that symbols can have more than one meaning. And some of their brains were still stuck on, well, Ellen White says Vashti was a good queen. How can you call her an immoral queen, right? They got like really upset about it. And it seemed like God was using that as a test. Maybe it is, in a sense, a test for all of us to see whether or not we'll be able to get out of that, just that, how you began this as a study of the Bible being a whole, where we have to accept it as a whole, and that it's a parable, and that SDAs have only accepted the moral truths of the Bible. And that even in itself shows the corruptness of the SDAs, because how can they explain this book away as a moral story? That they would have to do a lot of jumping through hoops to try and make it sound like, oh, well, right? I mean, they have to put a spin on it to make it be a moral story, like you said, Lana. And so when we're able to cross over and see that these are symbols and pass that test, that even though Ellen White said that Vashti did an honorable thing, that's just one level of the truth that God is trying to open up to our mind. And wow, it's freeing, because then you have this huge story that tells us all about the church and just everything, right? And Yeah, this was one of my favorites. I'm glad you're doing it. This is really great. Thank you.
It's just amazing. So you have been at that time during this, this presentations. I mean,
Yeah,
about,
this is one
Book
of the
Esther.
first ones I remember them doing when he started School of the Prophets. Yeah.
Hmm.
And like I said, maybe Elaine will remember, because we watched those very first classes when they first went online. Every day that's what we did, was we watched a class. We would look forward to that. We didn't have all the classes that are now out there, right? It was a daily class, and then they'd have a camp meeting maybe once a year or something like that. So it's really increased the information. But yeah, this was one of the first stories they did in that class. So it's kind of like you're bringing us back to it now here again, which is good.
And to me, it's like learning from you, because it is. I am learning from you. I mean, I only heard from Elder Parminder when he once mentioned that, in the study of Book of Esther, that Vashti is actually symbolizes the church, the structure of the church. Then I was like, oh, okay. So, but I did not really. And the reason is because I really avoided this book together with the stories of David. Those stories I especially felt extremely, deeply, passionately I passionately disliked the stories about David and his many wives. It felt so unfair to the first wife, and then the
Yes.
second wife, and then in the end, then he chooses Solomon, and out of all things, out of all children, Solomon is the one, the result of this, this his thing. He is the one chosen as the king, which looked so unfair to me that I was
Yes.
like,
Yes, that's part of our test. Once this is opened up, then you see God in a whole different light, right?
yeah.
I felt the same way about Jacob. I used to feel so sorry for Leah. I'm like,
Oh,
oh,
yes.
poor Leah, the ugly sister, right? The one that, how could that be? Why is it always the beautiful one, right?
No.
And I just thought, this is so unfair. Who wants to hear this story, So probably others of us have felt the same way before we knew these wonderful truths like this.
Yeah, because all we looked at is from moral viewpoint, and because of that, it's a stumbling block.
Yep.
Okay, so yeah, maybe next window of opportunity, I will do the rest of this part 2, and part 3 as well. Yeah. Okay, but which is really, I really like this the name of Ahasuerus. The one of them is, the meaning is Lion King, and also I will be silent and poor. Imagine a name that has that kind of meaning. I will be silent and poor. That is so profound, and Lion King at the same time, which is amazing. Like it's really not a coincidence. He really represents Christ. Okay. I guess we could, if you guys would like to pray or discuss.
Well, thank you for the study, and I look forward to the next ones. And I don't know, are we ending? Are we praying? Are we discussing?
I guess we can discuss, or if there's, if there's questions, or we can end either way.
I have a question.
Uh-huh.
In the beginning,
Okay,
and
let
we keep-
me share this first so that I know what we're talking about. Uh-huh.
where you have the line of the first day of the first month, first day of the fifth month, and the 10th day of the seventh month.
Yeah.
We keep saying in our movement that is from Ezra
7, 9. Mm-hmm.
Can somebody explain though about the 10th day of the 7th month?
He mentioned that it has been derived later on within the presentation. I think he goes over it in the series about, on Book of Ezra, more in detail. But he also mentions within this series, if I remember correctly, I think he mentioned about how he derived this 10th day of the 7th month. But I did not prepare those slides yet. But yeah, it's something that we can keep in mind.
Yeah, because as the 10th day of the 7th month is not in Ezra 7.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's something that's been calculated, derived, because there's two evidences, and I don't remember which were those, or I don't remember the particulars, but I remember that it's been derived, and he showed it actually how he derived it. But it was a little complicated for just for somebody to just remember. I mean, well,
one that I know of, the way I understood it back in time. There was a little booklet on FFA's website called the 7th Month Movement.
mm-hmm.
And the argument of the pioneers was that, you know how Daniel 8 is talking about the judgment.
Mm-hmm.
So the judgment, the atonement, the cleansing of the sanctuary was the 10th day of the 7th month.
Mm-hmm.
And it was all connected to 2520 also.
Mm-hmm.
Elaine, maybe she can explain more.
I was thinking about your question too, but I was in and out. I forgot something that needed to be done. And so I just came back in and heard the tail end of that question. Because this is also been a long time for me. So the 10th day of the 7th month is not in.
It's not in Ezra 7.
I didn't remember that.
You can find the 10th day of the 7th month when they, the first time they come back from Babylon and they build the altar. And then the 10th day of the 7th month, it says that the altar is finished and they have the feast. But it's not in the 3rd decree. So the way I remember from back in time was from that booklet, 7th Month Movement, where I don't know if Joshua Himes or one of those people is explaining about the 7th Month Movement is actually part of the sanctuary system, because it's the Day of Atonement.
Yeah, I just posted that in the chat.
Is the 10th day of the 7th month, does that represent October 22 too?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. It's a good question. Yeah, and if I remember correctly, I think he goes over it in the further within the Book of Esther, actually, because within the Book of Esther there is quite a serious calculation, not to say calculation, more like derivation comes, follows. And that's the presentations that I'm a bit, not to say afraid, but they are tricky. You have to follow exactly the logic how he's coming to it.
What
So,
presentations are these?
oh, this is Esther, Book of Esther.
Is it this year or
It's from 2016 actually. I thought it's 2015, but it is 2016.
I think I have the notes on Esther, and I have the notes on the Seven Thunders from back then.
Mm-hmm.
So that'd be pretty cool to go back and look at that, because these were our waymarks that we studied the first day, the 5th day, and the 10th day. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, within actually that same, right after that presentation, there is also a series, the whole series about Ezra 7-9. So we can go back, or I can go back and take a look and just give on that logic of that particular.
Yeah, these things are good to know, because it's our arguments when we will go to the people to show them the first day of the 1st month, and why the first day of the 5th month, and why the 10th day of the 7th month. These are arguments we need to know.
That's something that I didn't even remember, that the how we arrived at the 10th day of the 7th month. So I guess maybe that's why you're asking it, because I don't remember either.
Yeah, I remember when I was looking at these lines, and I struggled a lot with this 10th day of the 7th month because I couldn't find it in Ezra. And that's how I understood it from this booklet, the 7th month movement. Somebody told me or something. But I don't know if the website, the FFA website, has the book still, or I don't know. I probably have it at home somewhere, or it must be in the Pioneer writings.
I think if you continue with these, that he'll lay that out in time, because it looks like he's really thorough in this presentation. I never saw Parmender's, so this is new to see it like this, Lana. But I just only saw Jeff's and the School of the Prophets, you know, their version of it.
Yeah,
So this is very helpful.
yeah, there's this presentations on the book of Daniel from the very beginning, very old presentation of Elder Parmenter, and he was talking about this 9/11 from a different standpoint, and the way he was explaining, and he even said that this is how I like to, you know, rationalize. This is how he likes to, you know, understand how he understands it, and then he apologizes because he says that this looks convoluted and complicated, but to me it makes sense. So some, you know, something among those between those lines.
Yeah, he's more thorough. I
Yeah,
think
and
Pittenger was a little bit superficial.
yeah, because when you're just say, you know, 9/11's nine testimony, you know, page 11, you go, you know, something like that, or you know, your you know, in the Bible there's also the 9/11, yeah. And when you try to make this kind of argument, it actually starts from the verse 8, you know, instead of verse 9, where he talks about 9/11. Is it in Revelation? And that that is a bit you know, embarrassing, because if you start presenting it, not Revelation, it's the okay, I forgot how that verse, but it's a very flimsy explanation. Like it's you can't present it and then with the full, you know, with a straight face and defend it, you know, because
Yeah,
it's flimsy.
if you come in contact with somebody more educated than you're.
So it was always linked to the Day of Atonement, right? And we linked it to the Sunday law, right? The third decree.
Yeah.
Is that right? But,
Yeah.
but nobody remembers how we linked it to the Sunday law and Day of Atonement, because actually
It's the cleansing of the sanctuary.
Yeah.
What'd you say? I didn't hear it.
I guess I wanted to say that if you would like to hear that more, I can just give you that piece of information because it's in my notes. He goes about the 10th day of the 7th month. It's also part of this story when the decrees start coming up. He goes into decrees. I mean, he goes into that parts where the decrees start. He discusses the decrees, and to prove that, then he shows the logic, and it is related to the to this tense to this not to say to to this day days, you know, first day of the 8 months, and then first day of this 60 of 8th day of the first month, and the 16th day of the first month, and then, you know, there's a it's complicated, maybe not to say complicated, but it's something that we need to remember, something that's not that easy to just, you know, pull it out. Yeah.
I have to go back. I probably have some old notes that maybe show it, but I don't know if I'd be able to.
It's a good question, and we definitely need to, you know, something
because
to keep in mind to figure it out, and you know, talk over this within the next presentation.
I did not mean to trouble anybody, but
Oh no, that's
Good
fine. I
question.
mean,
yes,
it's a good question. That's what we need.
we can put
Because
our heads together and figure it out.
yeah, because like you say, you know, if we go somewhere and then say that this one is not mentioned, and then they're gonna be like, so why is it here? You know, how did you come to this? And then we're like, oh, I don't remember. I don't know. That's very bad. That's very bad.
Well, thank you.
Oh, no problem. Hey, my pleasure.
Put a couple of the verses in there that it tells you it's the Day of Atonement, which we already know. And I know that prior to, this is always stuck in my mind, because prior to, the first day is that's when the Feast of Trumpets begins. If you have a Feast of Trumpets, you know the trumpets are given a sound, right? And there's a Feast of Trumpets just before the Day of Atonement.
Yes, and he also shows that in the Book of Esther how the trumpets and this trumpet also depicts the all these symbols are actually part of the Book of Esther series.
But because you were showing the side of it, and if I missed something, let me know. You were showing the side of it where Cyrus is Christ in the marriage, right?
You mean Xerxes? Yeah.
Xerxes, yeah. Xerxes, yeah. Because Xerxes also comes in the time of Trump on our line.
Yeah.
Right?
Uh-huh.
It's been a while, but Xerxes comes before, and you can read that in the Book of Esther. There was a quote I wanted to pull up. Maybe I will. We got time or a couple minutes. I'll look it up in just a second. Because the ones that are the second angel's message, not a lot of them went, and God was trying to get them out of there before Xerxes comes, and Xerxes comes before the third decree. And so Xerxes is the one that orders the death decree. And God wants to get him out of there before destruction. I'm going to try to find that quote. Maybe somebody else knows this quote, because I know that eventually it's going to become prominent. It has to. Let me find it.
You mean such a time as this?
No, not that one. What is it? It's here it is, in the days of Queen Esther. Let me see if I can find it. It talks about these events. Here we are, I found it. Can I share?
Yeah, I'll stop share.
Right here. It talks about the crisis that Esther faced demanded quick, earnest action. I need to move you guys out of the way. The appearance of Esther before the king. Oh wait, back up. The crisis that Esther faced demanded quick, earnest action, but both she and Mordecai realized that unless God should work mightily in their behalf, their own efforts would be unavailing. So Esther took time for communion with God, the source of her strength. Go, she directed Mordecai, gather together all the Jews that are present in Shushan and fast for me, and neither eat nor drink 3 days, nor night or day. I also and my maidens will fast likewise, and so will I go in unto the king, which is not according to the law. If I perish, I perish. This next paragraph, the events that followed, because here we are talking about the seven thunders, right? I always thought this has to have something to do with the seven thunders.
It does, and in fact, this very quote he also discusses further down.
I've always been watching to see if somebody did, but I must have missed that. I don't think I watched those presentations, because I don't think I even knew of him back then, and I don't know that I ever remember coming across those ones. But the events that followed in rapid succession, and if you count them, I believe you can get 7. The appearance of Esther before the king, 1. The marked favor shown her, 2. The banquets, plural, because there was 2 of the king and queen with Haman as the only guest. So that's 4, 3 and 4. The troubled sleep of the king, 5. The public honor shown Mordecai, 6. And the humiliation and the fall of Haman, 7. Upon the discovery of the wicked plot, all these are part of a familiar story. So so if he did go into it, I might go try to check out that if they slow down on in Portugal, I'll try to get in there and listen to some of them. Because I've never heard anybody address that before. And the familiar story, it's a succession, a rapid succession of 7 events.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he goes over this about the gather all the Jews. He actually goes in a very, good detail. Even so, he says that that's not all there is. Like, he has more to say, but he's confined by the time. So he says that I will shrink it. So he that presentation, this seminar, even so it is 7 presentations, actually, there's more to it. So yeah, I mean, maybe we could dedicate it some time to study after we go over his notes, not to say notes, his presentation, so that we can understand deeper already, have a jump start.
Yeah, because it is before the 3rd decree, and this was another one that I thought it was. Meanwhile, conditions in the Medo-Persian realm were rapidly changing, and Darius, the one you were talking about, under whose reign the Jews had been shown marked favor, that's the second angel, I believe, right? The second call was succeeded by Xerxes the Great, who comes before Artaxerxes. And it was during his reign that those of the Jews who had failed of heeding the message to flee were called upon to face a terrible crisis, having refused to take advantage of the way of escape God had provided. So we're like living in that, where Adventists have refused to take advantage of the way of escape that God has provided, right? And then being brought face to face with death. So yeah, I'd like to dig back into that book together and into that. I'll try to get back and watch some of those if they kind of hold steady on the Portugal presentations, because I want to keep up with those as well. Because Esther is right in our time, but it is interesting. I don't remember how to go back, how you jumped from how you applied the 10th day to the 7th month to October 22nd. Well,
would you like me to do continue this? I mean, I guess we could fit it in somewhere.
I think everybody would like you to.
Okay. All right.
Yes.
Yes.
Because I have notes. I already made up the notes, but I mean, not handwritten notes. So, I mean,
These notes are even good if you keep downloading in a file and keep them for future, when we need to go to the people and explain them.
yeah, because this is related to our message, because they're going to ask, why are we supposed to leave our churches? Because that's how we used to believe that Seventh-day Adventist Church goes on all the way until the end.
The 10th day of the 7th month was, God made that the Day of Atonement, according to
Yeah, it is the
Leviticus.
Day of Atonement. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was the 3rd decree.
October 22nd is also the Day of Atonement, isn't it?
Yes.
Right.
And well, it would change from year to year, but in the Millerite history, it was October 22nd.
Right.
Because that's how Samuel Snow made his calculations. Actually, I think William Miller made those calculations earlier on, if I remember right. It's been a long time with some of that history. Seems like, I think Samuel Snow, maybe somebody remembers it better, used the same methods of study. I can't remember what it was.
Yeah, he did use the study that William Miller did.
Yeah.
Send it to him in a letter. And then he said that he never thought that anybody is going to pay so much attention to it.
Yeah. So so I know how they got that, but putting it to what we have, it's not in the book of Ezra, and it just shows that it's the Day of Atonement. So if it were the Day of Atonement, then we know that it would be, wouldn't it just be like the Day of Atonement for the United States and the church as a structure? If it's Sunday law? I always wondered about that because if it's the 10th day of the 7th month, we know that the agricultural, how do I want to say, I don't know, season, it wouldn't be a season, but it ran off a full year cycle, right? There were different things done in different seasons, but it was a full year cycle, wasn't it? So if you're at the 10th day of the 7th month, you still have a few months to go after that before you complete the year. I don't know, I never fully understood that. But you guys understand what I'm saying?
Just thinking.
After the Day of Atonement, there's still a few months to go. And then what they came to was the 12th month, which was Purim.
Yeah.
So they do go all the way till the 12th month in Esther, which I think is,
It does. 12. There's then actually Elder Parminder goes into days. There's 15, 16, 13, 14, 15, or 15, 16. Yeah.
it was during that they were able to, and that's why I think it's significant too, because it was during that where they were able to fight against those that were coming to kill them.
Yeah, the miraculous salvation from the death decree. So I guess the 12th month represents the second coming, huh?
The 4th month, did you say?
The 12th month.
The 12th month. Yeah, that's what I always thought it had to be. Because he's going to come and fight for his people, whatever that's going to look like. And there's going to be a big defeat and a turnaround on the wicked. Yeah, there's a lot in Esther that we don't understand. Yeah, I would love it if you wanted to continue that.
Oh well.
Do you have the current schedule?
I have no. I mean, I have the notes. I can just put them on the, on the arrange them on the slides. So you okay.
We have this day open here. That's May.
Friday 29th. Okay. I guess I can finish this second part and have the third part. Hopefully.
And then we may need, depending on how things go with Tony, there might be times that she needs somebody to fill in for her too. So.
Okay.
And is Jackie with us? I don't see her now. I know that I'm not sure how she's doing for her first presentation, if anybody's been working with her at all. So there's a possibility here. But yeah, it would be good to hear some more of that. Well, thank you, Sister Lana, for
No problem.
that was kind of last minute. You jumped in on that. Thank you.
Yeah, good job. Thank you.
It's just I was so excited when I finished this presentation. I was like, wow, this is so powerful, because it actually explains why why there's this second. How do you justify, in a solid way to a Seventh-day Adventist? How do you justify that you have been baptized in a different, in a different church, basically, not really? Well, yeah, it is a church. How do you justify it? Where is it in the prophecy? It isn't simply a symbol, but it is like a zoom in. The book of Esther, where he actually says that which means that this story of Xerxes is like zoom in of 9/11 to Sunday law, is a very important period. That's why he is zooming in. I mean, God is zooming in, so that we would have an understanding of what's going to happen and what is happening. that this is something very real, you know, the divorce from the structure and marriage to, because you know the same happened in the first on the line of Christ, and you know, but to us we have a fuller understanding of, since we have all the history of the past, and we have the fresh light of the present, so we can understand that what's going on in a and just not to say justify, but understand it on a deeper level and explain it on a deeper level. So these presentations are specifically good for that reason. So if we want to go out and evangelize, you know, go to the Seventh-day Adventists.
So we kind of had two divorces. So we divorced from the SDA, but we also divorced from Half a Day when the movement split, the two sides.
They left. We
They
saved
left.
the movement.
Yeah, I got a question on the 10th day of the 7th month. Isn't that when they started to build the wall of the Jerusalem? The first,
That's
they
when
left Jerusalem on the first, or on the, they arrived in Jerusalem on the first day of the 5th month, and then they started building the walls on the 10th day of the 7th month. Maybe?
Where does it say that?
they were finished then, weren't they, Christina?
In
Well, they could-
Ezra 7, under the third decree, there is no 10th day of the 7th month, is it? There is like in the first or the second chapter, but not in the 7th chapter. I didn't find any.
No, there's nothing in there.
Yeah, the first chapter, first and second chapter, I think it's the first decree. And that's where you find the 10th day of the 7th month when they finish building the altar. But that is the first decree. It's not the third decree,
Okay.
the one that we use to calculate the 457. So that's the only way. It's going back to Daniel 8, where it says the cleansing of the sanctuary. And the cleansing of the sanctuary is the 10th day of the 7th month.
Okay, that's where you get October.
I guess
Yeah.
we have to go back through Ezra to find all the decrees. Huh. I'm just looking roughly. Ezra 6 has the Darius. Go back to point out the one that Cyrus did. Yeah, I don't remember. Where do you find the third decree of Artaxerxes? This stuff is all so old to me. I don't remember any of it.
Third decree is in chapter 7.
Chapter 7? Yeah, Artaxerxes. Okay, I do make a decree. Okay. Thank you. It's been a long time. No, more to think about and study. Like we don't have enough. And it seems like it's interesting because what Brother Fell brought up last week is more that Parminder has suggested we need to be studying. It was like, he keeps laying out all these things, and what I have felt for the past few years is like, I don't know which direction to go. When Elder Tess first started the Midnight Cry in 2018, it was like there were so many different directions to go. I didn't know what direction to go. And I don't know how everybody else felt about that, but when he was going back in some review here in Portugal and going back to all this history of 9/11, it wasn't just 9/11, there was something else he was doing specifically, and he was saying that everybody should have by now already understood this stuff, and we shouldn't have to be learning stuff that we should have learned previously. And I was thinking, there were so many directions to go. How did you even know which direction to go other than pray that the Lord would lead you? So we've all done what we've done. And what was it? It was the dates. Maybe somebody's watched the presentation I'm talking about, where he's doing the siege of Vienna, and he's talking about how Elder Tess had 12 dates and historical dates leading to 2019. and how we should have gone in and been looking at all those events. And I was thinking, yeah, I've probably looked at a few of them over the past 2 years, but my main focus has been just on understanding the message itself and taking different pieces of it individually. And that just is one piece that I didn't take individually. I don't know if anybody else did.
Yeah, those 12 dates, it refers to, 490, 245, 126,
Right.
blah, blah, blah. It's all those that come to 2014.
Right. And that part I remember, but the actual going back and actually studying each one of them individually and seeing, because what they're looking at is Islam. I think Sister Lana's up to date on those. And I think that's what he's trying to get at, is finding Islam in those events and looking for dates of September 11, because
Well, there is a couple of people there that they've been to FFA, to the School of Prophets, and they did those studies. But me, I'm just trying to catch up with the videos because there are so many.
yeah.
I guess, the way I understood it is and it actually, that presentation actually was like a response to my question. I've been thinking about it. How do you justify that November 9th, that everything that's pointing to that day, how do you specifically justify that it is close of probation, specifically for us, that it is close of probation for us, for the priests? So I was wondering about it. How do you just justify that it's close of probation? How do you justify that it is a shut door? So, and that is something that, I remember I asked this question from the Bible study group, and I think some brothers they said that, oh, it's one of those presentations of the World War II where she, where it all points to the November 9th, that there's, and we went over, but that wasn't the answer. Like, it isn't simply the date, but how do you know that this date means close of probation? So that was something that I've been wondering, and I didn't realize that it's actually, we need to, that's what we probably, need to study and understand, and to understand why do you say that this November 9th, that everything is pointing this date, that everything is pointing to, that this date is a close of probation. And that's what he actually explained very clearly.
Yeah.
That presentation where he says, about that 529, how it is related from that before, what led to the siege of Vienna. So the siege of Vienna didn't happen in vacuum. So there was a previous event that led to it. And the same way is the,
What were you going to say, Christina?
Is November 9 connected to the revolutions?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we are going to touch this Saturday about November 9.
Yeah. I don't know if we'll get straight to November 9. There's 4 studies, but they seem kind of short, so we might be able to get through 2 of them, maybe. But I was kind of trying to look up some other information this week on what's currently going on, because what I always remembered is that there's, after the revolution, taking the Russian Revolution, and I think one other one, but especially the Russian Revolution, I remember that one for sure, that there's a period of preparation, and then the counter-revolution. And in looking at the events that are transpiring with Trump and the governors, his fight that he has with the governors, one day he says he can do whatever he wants because he has the power to do it, and the next day they were saying he was backing down, but I was thinking, it didn't seem like he was backing down to me. He was saying, if they don't do their job, we'll step in. In other words, he gets to determine what their job is. And if their job is to do what I say, then they don't do it, then he'll jump in. So I don't know what he's going to do, but I think that is going to be perhaps possibly a catalyst to the counter-revolution if he orders the country to open back up, and the governors refuse to open back up without the testing equipment and all that they need, and they're not ready, and they don't want to do it on his timeline, he wants the country open, even though he'll say that there are certain states he understands have problems, but he wants the country open. His base wants the country open. The evangelicals want, which are his people as well, they want the country open. And so if the governors go against what he says and do what they're claiming they're doing and starting to, I don't think consolidate's not the right word, but maybe consolidate, come together and work together, and they work against him, his base is going to be livid. The evangelicals, they'll be livid because they want the country back open. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I see what you mean, and it is seems to me the things that we were thinking that would not to say that I didn't think that is not gonna happen, but the civil war that we always thought that is purely information war, you know, the separation, that it could actually turn out into a real war. Who knows? I mean, I'm not saying that it will, but I'm just saying it all has a feel to it, isn't it? Because the states have the blue states have a strong argument against the federal government because they are hiding. Have you seen the Rachel Maddows news report about how the FEMA, the federal government, is stealing their shipment of the PPE?
Yeah.
You know, that is crazy. It is it's terrible. It's the government robbing its own states.
I have to keep in my mind, thank you for kind of bringing it the way that you did, because I have to remind myself always that it's information war. So I don't know what it looks like, you know, if that transpires, but the Civil War, you had Civil War and Revolution, basically the same thing, but yet it's war within the nation, you know, one side against another. But revolution, even though they're very much alike or are alike, revolution is also the overturning of a government to establish a new government. So he did that, and that's what 2019 marks with all the revolutions, is he did that. He's overturned the government, and he's still in that battle, you know, still in that battle with the judicial and the legislative, but he's exercising his power and his authority. And then, but the counter-revolution works as to go after the government that was just put in place. So I'll be interested. It'll be really good to go back through those studies. I was kind of trying to review them before, but even it's still going to be a good review even if I don't even look at them again until then. But I'm trying to.
I want to read some real quick I found with some dates, and I don't know their notes, and I don't know how far back these are. But there's a little paragraph here. It says, as we examine the principal year dates below the lines and see what connections, CONNEXIONS, exist between these and the day dates, we can then see any phenomena occur. If we are to understand any significance in any date, there must be a story that connects the date to the same events in a meaningful way. The target dates we are looking for here are the dates that represent or are connected to the close of probation. These are September 11th, November 9th, October 13th, October 22nd, HESHVAN, 15th day of the 8th month, and of course the 10th day of the 7th month, as well as the dates that represent the close of probation on Christ's line. These are September 30th, which is the 10th day of the 7th month in 27 AD.
Those aren't some of Theodore's notes, are they?
Huh?
Those aren't some of Theodore's notes, are they?
I know. I don't know. I don't think so. It's it started out with it says addendum introduction. It talks about dates, like a 15th day of the 8th month. I don't know.
Maybe something from Theodore.
It doesn't look like it because it's not get well. Maybe this one.
What is the date on this?
I'm looking to see. I don't have a date on it. because these are really, really old notes. And it doesn't tell me, let me look on the second page.
So some of those dates sounded familiar to dates that he was putting out.
Okay.
And I don't know without reading it, but
Well, look at my notes. I know I have all the notes on the 7 thunders when we're doing, and I still have the Ezra notes too from when we were studying all them. So I'll figure out. Anyway, but it did. I don't know. Theater kind of does a lot of different kinds of charts and stuff, and this is more of just words.
yeah.
And giving some like the 15th day of the 8th month, and just giving different dates. So I don't know.
But does somebody want to close in prayer?
Yes, I can pray. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this study that we have had just now. Please give us wisdom and understanding that we may retain the things that we learn, that we may fill our minds with the things that bother you, that we may have your thoughts and your feelings. Help us to stay away from temptation and help us to fully repent and fully turn, fully become your people, that we would be found faithful and faithful and your true servants. Dear Heavenly Father, please bless us all for the rest of the evening and help us to continue with the studies and help us to find time and an opportunity. In Jesus' name we pray and we thank you. Amen.
Amen.